You must have heard of Newton's third law of motion. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. And that stands true for almost everything, be it the way we work, our psychology, or the way things work around us. Even in academia, if there is an extreme opinion, the reaction to that is equally extreme and totally and completely opposite. For instance, if a section of scholarship holds, they believe that post 1500 BCE, there is a migration from Central Asia, which led to the emergence of culture in the Indian subcontinent. The reaction and opposite view is that no, there is actually out of India migration from east to west. Similarly, I have also read in many history books, and I'm amazed to find that even today, a lot of historians believe that there is a void in Indian history from 1000 BCE to 600 BCE. Now, technically, that may be true because if true only if we believe and we go by the definition that history is where the written records are available or writing, we start finding evidence of continuous writing and written evidence are largely available. If we go by that very definition of history, then perhaps that particular statement holds true. But if not, actually, our histories begin right from the time when our ancestral hominid species started to make stone tools and started to protect themselves, started to evolving, and started to show cognitive evolution. So that's where actually our past really begins, and not just with the written records. So, there is these opposite views which holds perhaps that there is a migration by 1500 BCE, that there is absolute gap in Indian history post the decline of Harappan civilization. The next culture comes after a considerable period of time. Therefore, that gap needs to be filled. The reaction to that particular theory or an opinion where there is a gap is by pushing dates very early, by giving an early dates, a series of early dates from various sites. And it has become a recent trend, really. Many archaeologists are claiming that their sites are earliest, and there is nothing but earliest. If the site is not the earliest, and that seems to be the end of the world, it seems. A lot of sites have started to get these early dates, and archaeologists started to push back the antiquity of various cultures quite early on. And a lot of us believe, a lot of scholars believe that this is probably an attempt and a reaction, an extreme reaction to this particular notion where historians keep on claiming that there is gap in history. Now, early dates are very important. Surge in scientific dating, new dating technologies coming up. Archaeological sites are rigorously dated now. It has become quite accessible to date our samples. It's much easier to date our samples. But what has happened is that when you get an early date, when you get actually get a range of dates. So when you pick up an early date, you need to have an evidence supporting these early dates, which is largely missing in discourse, which is largely missing in discussions, right? Recently also, and when these particular evidence or these claims are made in public domain, and naturally a lot of emotions get stirred up. A lot of people are interested to know how early can the antiquity of India can go, and then it sort of sets a very wrong narrative at times, and that is very hard to break in academia. Recently, there were news of Rakigari being an 8,000-year-old city. There was not enough evidence, even in the newspaper where the article was published, to actually have considerable evidence to back it up. In fact, even the core team was not consulted in making such headlines. Going to another site recently called Vadnagar, where a newspaper labeled the site as the oldest living city dating to 800 BCE. Now, that particular statement really amazed me because, truth be told, we have many other sites in spread across the country which are way earlier, dated way earlier than 800 BCE, and they show continuous evolution and cultural growth all the way to medieval period. So Vadnagar is not just the only living city in our country, and the new dates are interesting, but again, context is missing. So, in this column, I'll be talking about two sites in southern India which actually are not only filling up the gap of from 1000 BC to 600 BCE, but actually we are going way past that to about third millennium BCE and have shown continuous cultural evolution all the way to medieval period. And also, these settlements are the living settlements, which shows that there is a continuation occupation of that particular landscape. Hello, my name is Disha Ahluwalia. I'm an archaeologist and I write regular columns in archaeology for ThePrint. And in this week's column, I'm discussing about two important sites called Muski and Brahmagiri in Karnataka, which are very important not only for setting up the cultural continuity in southern India, but also are very important for the entire Indian archaeology. And quite important so that even you find evidence of Ashokan edicts at both of these sites. So when these sites were discovered and then eventually they were excavated, both sites are excavated. Brahmagiri was the most famous excavation. Actually, it was excavated by earlier as well, but one of the most famous excavation is by Mortimer Wheeler in 1947. Muski was also excavated by B.K. Thapar in 1950s, a decade later than Brahmagiri's excavation. And even now, at present, a lot of Indian archaeologists are working in understanding the landscape use and spatial distribution of archaeological data within the area of Brahmagiri and Muski, trying to understand how spatially diverse this particular settlement were and how at different period the different areas were occupied and then used. There are evidence, as I've mentioned, of Ashokan edicts at Muski. The edicts actually give the term, mention the name Ashoka, which actually cleared the air that most of the edicts which mention Priyadashi as a title is actually written by Ashoka himself. So that particular edict is very, very important. Now, coming to archaeology and what archaeological sequence and culture sequence is talking about these two sites. Brahmagiri and Muski, both of these sites date back to Neolithic period. Neolithic, in simple terms, is the phase of early farming, and the dates of farming and Neolithic, and it's also to be, I should mention, it's not just farming or sedentary life or domestication. It also the stone tools, the kind of tool technology that come in picture during this particular period, and the dates of Neolithic within the country also varies from region to region. At times, Neolithic continues well within or is contemporary to, whereas other urban cities like Harappa, for instance, Burzahom is a Neolithic settlement which is contemporary to Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, Akhigadi, and other urban centers of the Bronze Age civilization. And so similarly, at Muski and Brahmagiri also, Neolithic goes far back to about third millennium BCE, sometime dated to about 3000 all the way later to 1500 BCE. So, which is very interesting at both these sites. And at Muski, when B.K. Thapar excavated the site, they found few copper objects as well, which made him to feel that copper started to make its way into into the Neolithic culture. So infiltration of copper has already begun, and when he published the data, he titled his paper as Muski, a Chalcolithic site. But of course, post after the Neolithic, at both these sites come the Iron Age, and in fact, even the new dates, new evidence coming from various sites in Tamil Nadu and otherwise also show the similar chronology. In southern India, you have Neolithic, which is often also termed as Neo-Chalcolithic, which means that within the Neolithic period you have copper objects and copper infiltration, and then comes the Iron Age, and then there is megalithic cultures. Now, megaliths are what if you've seen Stonehenge, it's similar concept. You have big stones put together into a structure, sort of a mega big stone structure where it's like a memorial thing for the dead. So then you have megalithic culture, and then post that you start finding early historic, and then going all the way to medieval period, all the way from Shatavahanas, going all the way to Vijayanagara dynasty of 14th century, 1400 CE. So you have this continuous evolution of culture within one settlement, and that's a large area that was occupied at different times, but that area was in occupation. So as you can see that at both Brahmagiri and Muski, the evidence, the archaeological evidence we start finding from the Neolithic period, which is about third millennium BCE. At times it's later, fourth millennium BCE. Also going all the way to Vijayanagara dynasty, which is a very interesting example. It's a very important example of showing continuity and change. At these two sites, we don't find any gap. We don't find that the culture is abandoned or there is absolute no cultural continuity. As I've mentioned, in fact, even copper started infiltrating, even the culture sort of slowly and gradually, change. So there is a change of cultures, which we even see even today in our present day context. Our cultures are all always changing in fact very rapidly now with technology and globalization. But here you have this continuation of cultures, and there is continuity of change. So the statements that are often made in historical discourse is that by 1500 BCE, there's absolute, there's a constant emergence of culture, or there is a void in Indian history. Sites like Muski and Brahmagiri does not suggest. And I'm sure that the reaction to this would come that these sites are in southern India, the gap is in northern India. So, of course, in the following columns, we will be discussing about more such sites, and we'll be discussing at length as to how these statements don't hold true all the time. There are rare examples, but largely we do find sites which are multi-period, which are multicultural, and they show a complete chrono-cultural sequence in different regions. So they represent regional histories. Now, we often talk about regional histories. We talk about micro histories, macro histories. So, similarly, archaeology is also dealt in the same manner. There are regional micro archaeological cultures. They are macro archaeological cultures. So we find that everywhere, and it's important when we are discussing about archaeology to go and understand the regionalities of culture and how these cultures change from place to place. And for more on this, you can go on and read my column on Brahmagiri and Muski. You should also check out my column on Burzahom, which also shows connectivity and also shows this sort of regionality or regional culture, because Burzahom also have a continuous occupation right from Neolithic. It has megalith, early historic, and medieval period. So you should go and check out that particular column. It's a very interesting site, and like all archaeological sites are. To read more on this very topic, you should check out my column. The link will be given in the description box below. You should also check out the column on Burzahom, as Burzahom again shows a very regional indigenous evolution of cultures. It shows continuity and change. It's a very interesting site which also has a similar sequence going from Neolithic all the way to medieval period. And it's a very interesting site because it also shows collaboration and connection with the contemporary Harappan civilization. So you should check out that particular column. And for more such interesting stories, please subscribe to the Print's YouTube channel and also follow them on their various social media platforms. And with more interesting stories on various archaeological sites, I'll be back soon. Thank you.